And just like that, the Tennessee Vols are searching for their new starting quarterback. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers or friend available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by TurboTax. If you're ready for stress-free and the most money back guaranteed, head on over to TurboTax.com today and get matched up with your expert. Well, speaking of stress-free, it has not been a stress-free offseason for the Tennessee Volunteers as this Nico Iamaleava drama has come to a head here on Saturday morning. News coming out that Nico Iamaleava, the era in Tennessee, has come to an abrupt end as some breaking news on Saturday morning from Pete Thamel that Tennessee is moving on from starting quarterback Nico Iamaleava. Tennessee coach Josh Heupel informed the team at a team meeting. Iamaleava missed meetings and a practice on Friday, and that was the driver of this decision, according to Pete Thamel. A massive, massive decision from Tennessee. The Vols move on from their former five-star quarterback who was attempting to renegotiate an NIL deal he signed out of high school. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports reported that Iamaleava had submitted paperwork to Tennessee to enter the transfer portal. The relationship between the school and player is expected to be over. And like we said, Tennessee held a team meeting Saturday morning to make the announcement to the team. Iamaleava was preparing for his second season as the Vols starting quarterback. Of course, he sat behind Joe Milton as a true freshman before taking over. There for 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last year, while leading Tennessee to a 10-3 record and that first-round playoff appearance when they lost at Ohio State. Iamaleava went through spring practice at Tennessee, and on 3 Sports, Pete Nakos was the first to report the two sides were in active contract negotiations on a new NIL deal ahead of the spring game. And then, of course, he didn't appear at practice yesterday and the orange and white scrimmages today. And now the former top recruit will instead enter the transfer portal during the spring window, which will open up here coming up this coming Wednesday. It's a shocker, man, because we did our show on, Friday, and talking with some folks in Tennessee, they were kind of telling me, yeah, look, this is just about getting him a new deal, whatever. Well, I think a lot of folks looked at it and said, dude, you're already one of the highest paid players in college football. And like, no offense, your numbers were fine last year, but like, this is where the tricky line is, because it's like, you were good, not awesome, and you want more money? In the NFL, contracts are dictated by the market, right? Like, and by the market, I mean, like, based on what other people are getting and based on your output. And here it's almost like Iamaleava and his reps were saying, well, we're just looking at the market. Look at what Carson Beck just got. Look at what Darian Mensah got at Duke. But they neglected to look in the mirror and say, yeah, but how good are you? And it's kind of that thing where it's like, well, I'm awesome. Well, okay, yeah, you say that, but like the play on the field was good, not great. Like Nico wasn't even the best player on Tennessee last year, right? Like the passing game was fine. It was the run game that was so dominant with Dylan Sampson. So the standoff between the two sides and the school, they decide to cut ties after the talks emerged publicly this week. And like we said, Iamaleava skipped practice, and he showed a lot of promise. Look, I think he was a good quarterback. Came in with a lot of fanfare from the state of California. Was a 5-star prospect. Depending on what recruiting service you look at, I think On3 had him as the number 1 overall player. I think he was the number 1 player on 24/7 Sports for a while before Arch Manning jumped ahead of him. And we got to see an early glimpse of him in his first career start in the Music City Bowl as a freshman. Went up against that, dominant Iowa defense. which was best in the nation, and he had a couple of rushing touchdowns in that one. I think it was 3 rushing touchdowns. And look, this Josh Heupel offense is very quarterback friendly. I mean, we saw Hendon Hooker come in from Virginia Tech a couple years ago and grab the bull by the horns, and he was incredible. Now, the Joe Milton was kind of it was hit and miss. Now, Joe Milton's in the NFL, so he did something right. But I think we all kind of thought, oh, this is going to be a match made in heaven, Nico Iamaleava and Josh Heupel. And like I said, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, go back and look at what Hendon Hooker was doing a couple years ago. I mean, he was, basically a Heisman contender that year. And Nico, I think, through the first couple of weeks of the season, it was like, oh, maybe he's a Heisman contender. But that fizzled out pretty quick because the numbers just weren't backing it up. According to On3 Sports, their current NIL valuation, they rank Iamaleava $3.1 million. That would rank 12th on their NIL 100. Iamaleava, of course, got that big notable deal. What was it, $8 million? I think it was reported to go to Tennessee. So it was a little over $2 million a year he was making. Of course, he partnered with Beats by Dre prior to last season. Added a campaign with the Dairy Alliance in his portfolio. Also saw his NIL valuation continue to grow. Paul Feinbaum sounded off on this situation yesterday on SportsCenter. He said, the beginning of my career, school could go on probation for buying a player a hamburger from McDonald's. And now we have the first college football holdout. Not a big deal in the NFL, but this young man literally is holding out for more money, and he's already being paid about $2.5 million. So we are at an inflection point in the sport that we've never been before. We should have seen it coming. It is legal now where players are about to make even more with the upcoming House settlement. But we're a day away from Tennessee's spring game. This was yesterday, and the star quarterback who led them to the playoffs last year, we don't know if he's on campus. We don't know if he's left. We don't know if he'll be back. And a lot of Tennessee fans have said they don't want him back. They're fed up with him in this moment of time. And like we said, the transfer portal window will open in just the coming days. What's interesting about this is Nico's dad tweeted out on Friday. He tweeted, quote, more games being played off the field than on the field. Expletive Nakos, taking a shot at Pete Nakos, from On3 Sports called and asked me directly. I told him I had no idea on what he's talking about. He said his, quote, close source that he trusts with his life verified the news. Well, Pete Nakos looks like he knew a thing or two here. And I just always think it's so weird. Like, according to our source that we talked to on Thursday night, said they didn't even know how much of this was Nico himself. That he even mentioned the parents and the agent were doing this to try to get him more money. So this is where, like, the vitriol for the kid is kind of like Nico's maybe just doing what he's told, right? If his parents and his agent and the rep and the handler and all these people are telling him, hey, we're doing what's best for you. We're gonna get this money up, and hey, skip practice. Don't go to practice. Nico's like, you sure? Don't go to practice? The spring game Saturday. No, don't go to practice. We're gonna hold out. We're gonna hold a firm line. We're gonna get more money from the NIL. And Nico's probably like, I just want to play football. But Matt Hayes, writing yesterday, he took a pretty firm stance. USA Today. He said, a guy half the player of former Tennessee star Hendon Hooker is holding the Vols program hostage, and now it's time to cut him loose. And this is where you credit Josh Heupel and company. They did. They held firm, and Tennessee's moving on. So I think that's what's interesting here about the headline is the headline on Friday was Nico's holding out. He wants more money. The headline on Saturday became Tennessee is moving on from Nico Iamaleava. So an interesting turning point in the storyline. One big factor to looming over both sides here. The SEC rules prohibit transferring within the conference from the spring portal if you want immediate eligibility. That means Nico cannot transfer to another SEC school, and no quarterback on a current SEC roster can come to Tennessee and play next season. Now, Nico could go to another SEC school and sit next year. Tennessee could bring in a quarterback from another SEC school and he could sit next year. But the SEC is the one conference that, remember, we talked about that rule when it came out. It seemed like Greg Sankey and the coaches, this is what they wanted because, it's a little bit of tampering, right? Or dangerous, danger of tampering. Like, for instance, Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell all battling for the Alabama quarterback job. Let's say Austin Mack went through all last year at Alabama and through spring ball with the Ryan Grubb playbook coming in with Kalen DeBoer. And then what if next week, Austin Mack went in the portal and went over to Auburn and he brought the full Alabama playbook and went, hey, there's what Ryan Grubb, is bringing in. Here's what he's running. So I get the dangers in that and why they have it. It's a little bit of protecting yourselves in the SEC. But the question now is, where will he go? Well, a lot of people are projecting Nico will head back out west. From California. I've seen everything from Oregon to USC to UCLA could all be in play for him. But somebody did bring up, like, look, how good is Nico really at quarterback? He was in a quarterback-friendly offense with a dominant, excellent running game. And I saw, somebody tweeted, what are his actual options right now? Because I'm sure he's not interested in going to a mid-major. And also, you're going to have to learn a playbook pretty quickly. Like, it's already April. So it's crazy that, that this happened. One last thing closing here on the Nico thought. Somebody said USC could be a good fit. They are projected to have redshirt junior Jaden Mayava as their starter. Freshman Husan Longstreet is in the fold. So you got to think Nico Iamaleava would instantly be the starter there at USC, would instantly have USC as a contender in 2025. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Coming up next, what are some folks on social media saying? We will get you caught up on that in just a sec. Hey, but first, I want to remind you guys, this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today, an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Go check them out today. TurboTax.com. Right along here, Locked On SEC, a rare Saturday edition, as we are reacting to the news that Nico Iamaleava no longer with the Tennessee Volunteers. If you missed it, the big news coming out Saturday morning from Pete Thamel at ESPN that Tennessee is moving on from starting quarterback Nico Iamaleava. Tennessee coach Josh Heupel informed the team of the decision at a team meeting. Iamaleava missed meetings and practice on Friday, which was the driver of the decision. Well, another driver of the decision was certainly him looking for more money. And this is the tough part, man, of paying players. We'll get into a little bit more in the aftermath and big picture stuff here, but this is the new world we live in of college football. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, is it ruining the sport? Is it making it a little bit tougher to stomach? Where's the pride and the pageantry, the kids who just grew up dreaming of playing for a certain school? I don't care if I get paid. I just want to go there and get an education and play for that school. Yeah, that's kind of, fairy tale of the past, I guess. All right, here is what people are saying. Jeff Schwartz, longtime NFL guy who's covered the sport. He says, I wonder how much the locker room played a role in Tennessee releasing Nico so quickly. He said, I never thought NIL would affect the locker room much, but this situation is unique. The highest paid player is holding out when he's not good enough to hold out. I can't imagine that sat well with his teammates. that's the thing. Like, this is, and I hate to throw the kid under the bus. You hate to destroy him like this, but like, if this were somebody else, and I'm trying to think of a good comp. I mean, if this had been Caleb Williams a couple years ago at USC, you kind of got it, right? I mean, he was going to be the Heisman Trophy winner, he was best player. If this had been Jaden Daniels a couple years ago at LSU, Heisman Trophy winner, was awesome. I think everybody around goes, yeah, we get it. Jaden wants more money. He's holding out. Totally get it. If this had been Dylan Sampson last year at Tennessee, look, they had some good backs behind him, but I think it would have been, you could have understood, okay, SEC leading rusher, one of the best running backs in the SEC. Although I guess it's a little bit different because he became that this year. We didn't know he was going to be that coming into the season. But yeah, I mean, insert player. Like, there are some players that, yes, you in 2019, if Joe Burrow had been like, I'm holding out, whatever, like you kind of get it. But like the guys who don't have the skins on the walls, the guys who's just like, yeah, he's pretty good. Rocky Boyman tweets out, good for Tennessee and Heupel. Put an end to this BS right away. Terrible decision by Nico. What offense can he master in under 5 months? And that's the point I've been saying is like, where's he going to go and learn a playbook? I mean, maybe Lincoln Riley is literally FedExing him a playbook overnight, saying, hey, come to USC. I'm going to make this so friendly for you. Give me your terminology. We'll use whatever you were using at Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be tough to go in and learn a new playbook, learn a new offense in limited amount of time and take over and be awesome next year. Another school, maybe he can do it. Who knows? Dan Walken tweeted out, he said, a prominent school, an SEC school, getting absolutely knifed like this by a player they invested millions in feels like a potential turning point where university presidents realize they need to do the thing they don't want to do. And that's the thing about this. I mean, we're days away from perhaps, legislation and a lot of people pointing to the government saying, we need you guys involved. I just know there's a lot of unsettling things around college football right now. A lot of people don't like, the Wild Wild West. And it's one thing to say player empowerment where players can get paid. It's another thing to say there's just no loyalty, period. I get it. There's no, loyalty at times from the coaches. But as somebody said, maybe put a buyout in these NIL deals with players. Oh, you want to leave the school? Well, you have to pay the buyout. Because that's what the coaches have, right? Like people always like, coach can leave overnight. Yeah, but technically when they're under contract, there's a buyout involved. The other school has to pay that money to the school to let him out. Same thing could happen here. If Nico was under a current NIL deal at Tennessee and had a buyout, yeah, you can enter the portal and go somewhere else, but that school, wherever you go next, has to pay that buyout to us. I don't know. Maybe that's maybe that gets a little murky because they're not technically employees and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know what the solution there would be. But this move certainly puts both Tennessee and Nico in difficult spots here. And so now the question becomes, where does Tennessee go from here? Well, on the roster, they have two guys who could basically do it. The first one is Jake Merklinger. And he was the guy who was the backup last year and, redshirt freshman who hung around and from Savannah, Georgia. Was a true freshman last year, I should say, and he will be a redshirt freshman this coming year. 6 of 9 for 48 yards last year, 2 sacks. So he got in mop-up duty against Tennessee Chattanooga and against Kent State. So very limited playing time from Jake Merklinger, but he's a guy who, some people really like. So I would think he's probably in the driver's seat right now. The other one is George MacIntyre, who's a true freshman who just signed with Tennessee. So, if you've seen this kid, he's skinny, he's frail, like he's going to have to put on some muscle, put on some weight if he wants to be a starting quarterback in the SEC, which I think he will, but maybe a little bit too much to ask from him in 2025. But this is from Pete Thamel. He said, according to ESPN sources, officials from Tennessee's collective have already begun reaching out to third parties tied to potential Iamaleava replacements for 2025. With his future uncertain, collective officials began to make calls Friday to see what the potential market could look like. One quarterback got more money from his school Friday after Tennessee's collective called third-party officials tied to him. Again, that's from Pete Thamel, a source telling ESPN. But this move certainly puts redshirt freshman backup quarterback Jake Merklinger in the driver's seat to be Tennessee's starter next year. It's difficult, though not impossible, for a college quarterback to come in, learn the offense, win the starting job in summer camp. And true freshman George MacIntyre is the backup. Tennessee has the top 10 recruit in the class of 2026, and Faison Brandon committed. He's a 5-star who, some of the services have him as the top-rated quarterback in next year's class. So that is the other storyline of this, is where will Tennessee go next? And again, they can stay in-house, but Tennessee fancies himself at least a 10-win team and a playoff team again. Does this, is Jake Merklinger getting you to 10-2 or better? I mean, you better have a dominant run game. Yes, you lose Dylan Sampson, but, Peyton Lewis, Deshaun Bishop, Star Thomas, is that three-headed attack? Can they just dominate the SEC in rushing? Possibly. Certainly could. But what a mess. What a mess. I just saw Chris Felica tweeted out on Nico Iamaleava. He said last year he threw 19 touchdowns. 11 came against Chattanooga, UTEP, and Vandy. 4 of 9 touchdowns in SEC play came versus Vanderbilt. So that's what we keep saying is, don't want to throw the kid under the bus, but for what they were paying him and what he was producing, it wasn't the best. And yes, they had some injuries at wide receiver and all this, but Tennessee looks to be in pretty good shape right now at wide receiver. Chris Brazel's back. Mike Matthews, the true freshman from last year. Braylon Staley's had a nice spring. You got some true freshmen coming in. Rodarius Jackson, Travis Smith. So, yeah, I like the weapons that Tennessee has. It's just going to be this is a big decision for Josh Heupel now. But take that for what you will. The report that Pete Thamel says Tennessee's collective already calling around to third parties looking for a quarterback to come in. Because look, it could be they could say let's ride with Jake Merklinger, but I still think you got to bring in a quarterback to compete with him, with some quarterback with some kind of skins on the wall, some kind of experience. So we'll see. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, run along here, Locked On SEC, and talking about the big news that Nico Iamaleava out at Tennessee. If you're just joining us or just catching us on the podcast or YouTube forum, Nico Iamaleava is out, and this has caused a big discussion of what's going to happen with the future of college sports and paying student athletes. Buddy of ours, John Crumpler, he tweeted out. He says, side note on all this, I don't enjoy pundits who take all the oxygen of the NIL conversation to virtue signal that students should get paid. They should, instead of acknowledging the legitimate issues of a system where you have to re-recruit your own team 24/7. College football is not in a healthy place. He says there has to be a way to balance the insane wealth that college football generates in conjunction with the traditional values of education, player development, etc. Probably starts with acknowledging students as university employees and giving them legitimate contracts. This is where the tough part begins, because if you make them employees, okay, how are they paid? Are they hourly? Are they salary? Does everybody make the same salary? No. Does this guy get paid more than this guy? Do taxes? Are you state, federal employees now because it's a state school? Are you a state employee? There's just so many different ramifications of that you got to go down. And I'm all for discussing it and going down that path if we have to. But yeah, it does feel like contracts probably need to be a thing of the future. Like it just needs to be, if you're going to sign a player to an NIL deal and have them make this multi-million-dollar investment, you got to get a little bit of the investment from the player to say, I'm going to stick around for the next 3 to 4 years. You got me. I'm locked in. I mean, I remember being in coaches' rooms where they would have their depth charts up for the next 3 years. And you would see like, okay, this year's this, 2026 is here, 2027's there. And it's a depth chart listing quarterback, running back, wide receiver, offensive line, all that. Well, coaches can't do that anymore. Like, you don't know who the hell's going to be back next year on your team. Like, it is a different day and age. Again, take out the money part of it. We're just talking about trying to build a roster, and I think that's a big motivating factor why Nick Saban moved. It wasn't about paying players. I don't think Nick Saban had a problem with the paying the players part. It was more like he talked about the first thing out of a parent's mouth when he sat on their couch was, how much money are you paying me? But I think the other part was, how do you build a roster for years to come when you have to re-recruit these guys constantly every single offseason? Go, hey, Johnny, are you coming back next year? I need to know, because and then it's like, if you lose 12, 15, 20 guys, God, you got to go dip into the transfer portal. You got to go replace your starting left guard and your starting safety and your starting nickelback. It's a lot for the coaches to take on. Look, they're well compensated by it, sure, but a lot of them just want to coach football. Like, a lot of them just want to call X's and O's and let's go win some football games. And now it's like constantly the constant roster management is insane. A few notes here. I saw this was a tweet. Somebody said, well, the model's different now. They're getting paid. The kid made a choice to quit on his team. Myron Metcalf from ESPN said he didn't quit on anybody. He tried to get more money in a system that doesn't have any guardrails against that, and he will still make millions somewhere else. John Powers said, you fail to account for the timing of the move by Nico's camp. This was about trying to create fiscal leverage by the timing of completing spring practice. Additionally, he had signed a 3-year contract. Myron Metcalf said, stop saying contract like there's a CBA and a union. Of course, he tried to create leverage. My point is, there is nothing in this chaotic system to prevent it, and that should be the focus. He didn't do anything illegal because there aren't any rules in this, just vibes. And then Darren Heitner jumped in. He said, you don't need a CBA or a union for two parties to enter into a binding contract. This is an odd and very false take. So, again, this is where the discussion will go further on. Do you signing a contract, is it a binding contract between the collective and the player and saying, I'm committing to be here for the next 3 years? Maybe even put some verbiage in there. We will not renegotiate unless ... player wins the Heisman, school wins 2 playoff games. Like, you could put some escalators in there that would call for a bump in pay, if just like contract incentives in NFL contracts. I think you could do that with an NIL deal. And then lastly, Pete Nakos putting this out there. He said Tennessee has begun the due diligence on what quarterbacks will be available in the spring portal. So again, I don't know if there's going to be any huge home run hitters coming out in the spring portal as far as quarterbacks go. But look, if you're a good quarterback, you want to play for a good head coach. Josh Heupel, pretty good track record of working with good quarterbacks, or getting the most out of them. So look, this story is just getting started, but appreciate you guys for coming on and checking us out on a Saturday edition of Locked On SEC. And remember to subscribe and check us out. We're here for you each and every day, talking all things SEC football. And hey, for your second listen, you could check out our friends over at Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for checking us out. Come on back on Monday. We'll react to all the spring games from the weekend. Is Jake Merklinger impressed at Tennessee's orange and white game? We'll see. Talk to you guys on Monday.